My daughter called me uneducated and worthless, then she went shopping with her mother-in-law. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Lila, and my daughter is Sadie. My husband is Derek, and his mother, Connie, has always been very controlling. I thought our family was close, but I was wrong. It all started one evening when we were having dinner together. Sadie looked at me with a sneer and said, "Mom, you don't understand anything. You're just uneducated and worthless." I froze. Derek didn't say a word, and my heart sank. The woman I raised, the girl I taught right from wrong, had just humiliated me in front of my own husband. I wanted to cry, scream, disappear, but I stayed silent. Inside, a storm was brewing. I realized that no matter what I did, Sadie seemed to admire her mother-in-law more than me. That night, I watched her secretly texting and planning a shopping trip with Connie. She would brag about the fancy stores, the gifts, and how grown-up she felt with her mother-in-law. At first, I felt hurt and betrayed. How could my daughter value money and appearances over the woman who brought her into this world? I thought about everything I had sacrificed for my family, all the nights I stayed up worrying about her, and all the times I put her needs before my own. But then I made a choice. I would not let Sadie's words or actions define me. I began quietly rebuilding my confidence, focusing on myself, and proving that I was more than the insult she threw at me. I found my own strength, my own voice, and my own path. Sadie went shopping with her mother-in-law, thinking she had the upper hand. But little did she know, I had already started a journey that would make me proud of who I truly am, strong, respected, and unstoppable. After that night, I started noticing small things I had ignored before. Sadie would disappear for hours with Connie, whispering and laughing as if they were sharing secrets meant to exclude me. At family gatherings, Sadie's tone toward me became sharper. She would casually say things like, "Mom, you really don't know how to handle this," or "That's such a silly idea," making everyone around me smirk. It stung more than I could put into words. I had always believed that family was a safe place, that my daughter would respect me no matter what. But now, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Derek didn't step in. He stayed quiet, watching the exchanges without defending me, and each time, I felt a heavier weight settle on my chest. The silence from him cut deeper than any insult. I tried to talk to Sadie, to remind her of the love and care I had poured into her life, but she dismissed me with a cold glance or a shrug. Connie seemed pleased with how Sadie treated me, always smiling and encouraging her behavior. It became clear that the two of them had formed an alliance, one where I was the target of ridicule. The more I observed, the more I realized that I couldn't react impulsively. Anger alone would not fix this. I had to be patient, careful, and smart. I began paying close attention to their patterns, noticing when Sadie's arrogance came out, and when Connie was feeding it. I took mental notes of every slight, every whisper, every moment I was undermined. Quietly, a plan began to form in my mind, not a plan born of revenge and anger, but a strategy to reclaim respect and dignity. I would not allow their betrayal to define me. Instead, I would turn their arrogance against them with careful precision, proving to both Sadie and Connie that I was far stronger than they imagined. In the midst of their laughter and mockery, I felt a strange calm. I knew the tables could turn, and when they did, I would be ready. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself replaying every moment with Sadie and Connie in my mind. I remembered all the nights I stayed up helping Sadie with homework, all the meals I prepared, and every little thing I had done to make our home warm and loving. It hit me hard. After all those years, my efforts were dismissed and mocked. I began to feel a heavy sadness that wouldn't lift. Simple tasks felt exhausting, and I questioned my own worth. I wondered if I had failed as a mother or as a wife. The laughter I overheard between Sadie and Connie haunted me, leaving a hollow ache inside. For the first time in years, I felt invisible in the family I had built with my own hands. One evening, I confided in a close friend, Marcy, someone who had known me for years. She listened patiently and then said something I needed to hear. "Lila, you've always been strong. Don't let them make you forget that. You don't need their approval to prove your worth. Her words sparked something inside me, a tiny ember of hope. I realized I didn't have to fight them directly or lose myself in anger. Instead, I could rebuild quietly, strengthen myself, and find ways to regain control without anyone seeing it coming. My mind started turning over ideas carefully, thinking of ways to show Sadie and Connie that disrespect has consequences. I would act with patience and precision. For the first time, I began imagining a path where I could reclaim respect, not through yelling or confrontation, but by letting actions speak louder than words. I would regain my confidence, my independence, and, when the time was right, they would understand the depth of their mistakes. As I lay awake at night, the pain of betrayal mingled with a growing determination. I knew my response would be clever and deliberate, not impulsive. In that quiet resolve, I felt a flicker of strength returning. The journey ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in months, I could picture a future where I was proud of myself again, and where Sadie and Connie would no longer hold power over me. It didn't take long for me to notice Sadie's new habits. She spent hours with Connie, going to expensive boutiques, trying on clothes she could never afford before, and showing off little trinkets she brought home. Every weekend, they seemed to vanish together, returning with stories of lunches at fancy cafes and small luxuries that made my heart sink. At first, I wondered if Sadie genuinely admired Connie's advice or guidance. But as I watched more closely, the truth became clear: Sadie wasn't impressed by wisdom or character. She was drawn to the sparkle of money, the thrill of new things, and the approval Connie lavished on her when she acted superior. I felt a bitter mix of sadness and anger. My daughter's affection had always been tied to what she could gain, not to love or respect. Back at home, the comparison started. Sadie would mention how well Connie cooked, how organized her home was, or how fashionable she looked. Every remark seemed designed to make me feel small, to remind me that I didn't measure up. Even the way she spoke carried a sharp edge, a sense of entitlement that I hadn't seen before. I realized I had to understand their dynamics before acting. So, I began observing quietly, taking mental notes of every betrayal. I noted the times Sadie mocked me, the occasions she sided with Connie, and the small manipulations she used to make herself feel superior. Patterns emerged: her arrogance was consistent, predictable, and fueled by Connie's approval. Instead of reacting immediately, I started keeping track, planning each step carefully. I knew that understanding these behaviors would give me the upper hand later. I could see the cracks in their relationship too: the selfishness, the shallow admiration, and the hidden resentments. In the quiet moments, I felt a sense of clarity. Sadie's obsession with appearances and status was her weakness, and I intended to use that knowledge wisely. I would not rush or act recklessly. By documenting every slight, I was preparing the groundwork to reclaim my respect and quietly turn the situation around, step by step. One evening, I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when I overheard Sadie and Connie laughing in the living room. Their voices carried through the walls, sharp and mocking. They were making fun of the meal I had planned, saying it was outdated and not worth anyone's time. My hands froze on the cutting board, and my chest tightened. Then Sadie's words cut deeper than ever. "Mom is so out of touch," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Honestly, she's hopeless. How does Dad even stand her?" The words stabbed at me like a knife. For months, I had tried to stay patient, to handle their behavior calmly, but hearing them belittle me so openly pushed me to my limit. I felt a mixture of fury, hurt, and disbelief. The woman I had nurtured, the daughter I had sacrificed for, had no respect for me at all. I realized then that staying silent would only allow them to continue, unchecked, believing they could diminish me without consequences. That night, after Sadie and Connie left for a shopping trip, I sat alone in the living room. I replayed their words, turning them over in my mind, and I felt a shift inside me. Anger transformed into determination. I wouldn't let this go. I wouldn't allow their cruelty to define me or erode my confidence any longer. Quietly, I began plotting. I didn't want a rash confrontation that would only satisfy them. Instead, I thought carefully about how I could respond strategically, turning their arrogance against them without them realizing it. Every insult, every mocking laugh, every dismissive comment became a piece of the puzzle. I started imagining ways to show Sadie and Connie that underestimating me was a mistake. A subtle plan began forming in my mind, one that would restore my dignity and make them recognize their misjudgment. For the first time, I felt in control. The anger that had weighed me down now fueled a quiet, deliberate resolve. This was the moment I decided I would act, not with impulsive emotion, but with precision and patience, ensuring that when the time came, the outcome would be entirely in my favor. After deciding I would no longer allow Sadie and Connie to belittle me, I began quietly working on myself. I enrolled in evening courses at a local community center, brushing up on skills I had set aside for years. The feeling of learning again, of growing, brought a sense of pride I hadn't felt in a long time. At home, I started making subtle changes. I rearranged furniture, added small touches to brighten rooms, and created a space that felt calm and welcoming. Every little improvement reminded me that I could shape my surroundings, and it lifted my spirits more than I expected. I also began managing finances more carefully, planning for things I had postponed. Opening a small savings account and tracking expenses gave me a sense of control and independence. These moves weren't about showing off, they were about reclaiming my own life and preparing for a future where I was confident and self-reliant. While all this was happening quietly, I noticed subtle shifts in Sadie's behavior. She began looking at me differently, sensing that I was no longer the same person she could dismiss. Her comments lost some of their sharpness, replaced by a hint of uncertainty. One afternoon, I spoke to Derek casually while he was fixing something in the garage. I mentioned how Sadie had been focused on luxury items and superficial outings lately, pointing out patterns he might not have noticed. Derek listened, attentive for the first time, and I could see him start connecting the dots. My quiet observations were starting to have an effect. I didn't confront anyone directly. My changes were subtle, almost invisible, but they built my confidence and made Sadie uncomfortable. For the first time in months, I felt power return to me, not through anger, but through deliberate, thoughtful action. By the end of the week, I could tell Sadie was wary. The woman she had mocked and ignored was now someone she didn't fully understand, someone who was quietly gaining strength. I smiled to myself, knowing my careful steps were already shifting the balance. I had been quietly observing Sadie and Connie for weeks, and the perfect opportunity finally appeared. One Saturday, they planned another long shopping trip, bragging about a boutique opening that supposedly had the best items in town. I decided it was time for my plan to unfold. I called the store ahead under a pretense, asking questions that subtly set things up without raising suspicion. Meanwhile, I made sure Derek knew I had errands nearby, so he could witness the outcome without it seeming planned. Everything had to look natural. When Sadie arrived with Connie, she strutted through the store, flaunting her new outfits and making small comments about how sophisticated she was compared to me. But as she reached the center display, a carefully timed mishap occurred. A pile of delicate merchandise toppled around her, ruining the image she had tried to project. Connie, standing beside her, couldn't help but stumble as well, knocking over a decorative stand and drawing the attention of staff and other shoppers. Both of them were flustered, trying to hide their embarrassment, but it was clear to everyone present that the scene had been a mess. From a distance, I watched quietly with Derek, who had been watching the store from a nearby cafe. His expression shifted as he observed Sadie's flustered behavior and realized how often her arrogance had caused tension at home. He finally seemed to connect the pieces, the disrespect, the favoritism toward Connie, and the lack of consideration for me. Inside, I felt a quiet thrill. This wasn't about shouting or confrontation, it was about a subtle, personal demonstration that arrogance and mockery could have consequences. Sadie's pride had led her to a public blunder, and Connie, unknowingly, had contributed to it. For the first time, I sensed that the balance was shifting. I wasn't just the woman they dismissed, I was the one who could anticipate, act, and turn their arrogance into a lesson. A calm satisfaction settled over me as I realized my careful planning had worked, proving that respect and cleverness could speak louder than anger or force. A few days after the store incident, I decided it was time to speak with Sadie directly. I waited until the house was quiet, and we were alone in the living room. My heart was steady, though my mind raced with what I needed to say. I began calmly, "Sadie, I need you to understand how your actions affect everyone in this family. The way you speak about me, the way you favor Connie over your own mother, it hurts, and it creates tension that no one deserves." At first, she rolled her eyes and laughed softly, as if I were overreacting. "Mom, you're being dramatic. It's just a few jokes. You take everything too seriously," she said dismissively. I stayed composed. "These are not jokes. I've been observing how you treat me, how you undermine the family, and it's not acceptable. I've tried patience, I've stayed silent, and yet it continues. I need you to see that your behavior has consequences, not just for me, but for your relationships here." Her expression shifted. I calmly laid out examples, moments when she mocked my decisions, compared me unfavorably to Connie, and ignored my efforts. Each point was precise, unshaken, and delivered without anger. Sadie's smugness began to fade, replaced by a startled silence. For the first time, she had no words to dismiss me. From the hallway, I could hear Derek entering the room. He paused, listening. Slowly, he began asking questions about her loyalty and the influence Connie had over her. I could see the doubt settling in his eyes, the realization that he had overlooked the pattern for too long. I maintained my composure, speaking only when necessary, letting facts and calm reasoning carry my words. The power that Sadie had once wielded over me through disrespect was now completely reversed. By the time our conversation ended, she was quiet, processing the truth she had long ignored. I walked away with my head held high, feeling a sense of control and dignity I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just defending myself, I had reclaimed my position in the family, quietly and firmly, and the emotional balance had shifted in my favor. Over the next few weeks, I began noticing subtle changes in Sadie. Her relationship with Connie started showing cracks. Connie grew impatient with her constant demands, and Sadie realized that the admiration she once relied on wasn't as unconditional as she believed. I watched quietly as the consequences of her behavior unfolded, and for the first time, she seemed unsettled without me needing to intervene. Meanwhile, I focused on myself. My confidence, once fragile, grew steadily. I took pride in small accomplishments, celebrated my independence, and embraced a sense of self-respect I had almost forgotten. Simple things, preparing meals with joy, organizing my home, completing courses I had started, felt empowering. I no longer defined my value through others' opinions. Derek began noticing the shift in our family dynamics too. He started taking small steps to support me, acknowledging my perspective and standing by my decisions. He asked Sadie to be more considerate and began setting boundaries with Connie. For the first time, I felt like a partner again, respected and heard, rather than ignored. The sense of control and inner strength I gained was liberating. I realized that all the hurt Sadie and Connie caused could not diminish me unless I allowed it. My emotional catharsis was complete. I no longer sought approval from my daughter or her mother. Their validation was unnecessary because I had found it within myself. In quiet moments, I reflected on how far I had come. The humiliation, the secret alliances, and the ridicule had taught me resilience, patience, and the power of thoughtful action. I was proud not just of standing up for myself, but of doing so in a way that maintained dignity and integrity. By the time Sadie and Connie recognized their missteps, I had already moved forward. I felt free, unburdened, and certain of my own worth. Life felt balanced, and the tension that once filled our home had eased. I understood finally that strength comes from self-respect, not fear or control, and that personal growth is the most satisfying revenge of all. With time, I found a calm I hadn't felt in years. The house, once tense with whispers and laughter meant to hurt me, now felt lighter. I enjoyed a newfound peace, moving through each day with a quiet confidence. Sadie seemed to sense the change and began reflecting on her behavior. She tried to apologize, but I could see that earning my trust again would be difficult. the damage had left lessons that couldn't be erased overnight. My life began to improve in ways I had long neglected. I joined a local book club, made new friends, and pursued hobbies that brought me joy. My evenings were no longer filled with worry over how I was perceived, they became moments of fulfillment and personal growth. Financially, I managed my resources carefully, investing in things that mattered to me, and feeling secure in my independence. I learned to embrace boundaries. I no longer allowed disrespect to enter my space, and I made it clear that any attempts to undermine me would be met with calm but firm resistance. This created a sense of stability I had never experienced before, and it became obvious to Sadie and Connie that I had changed. Their ability to manipulate or dismiss me had vanished. Most importantly, I discovered that my worth did not depend on anyone's approval. I had survived ridicule, betrayal, and indifference, and I had grown stronger because of it. My decisions, my choices, and my life belonged to me alone. I no longer measured my value through the eyes of others. Looking back, I realized the journey had been painful but transformative. I had learned patience, strategy, and the importance of self-respect. Life had tested me, and I had emerged wiser and more resilient. Every slight, every insult, and every moment of doubt had shaped the woman I had become. In the end, I understood that strength comes from within. I was no longer defined by Sadie's judgments, Connie's manipulations, or anyone else's opinions. I had reclaimed my voice, my dignity, and my life, and that was worth more than any approval I had ever sought. Do you think I made the right choice by standing up to Sadie and Connie, or should I have tried to forgive them? I'm really curious about your thoughts. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like mine.